Hi, you guys. Thank you so much for coming. I'm Peter. And I guess before we begin, I'm supposed to remind you to please turn off your phones and no videotaping, because I definitely don't want to be on YouTube. And I just have to say, doesn't this look like Grandpa's pair of pants? It looks like I'm wearing like huge pants up here. It's like, you know. Let's see here. I want to thank GDC and Colleen Mickey and my good friend Lee Petty, who is one smart and creative guy, for inviting me here today. I'm going to be walking back and forth because that's just how I have to do it. I'm not a podium guy. So I just wanted to start off by saying I started my gaming experience back in the early 90s, working for LucasArts, and I worked on, Monkey 2, Data Tentacle, Full Throttle, Grim Fandango. That's where I started. And then I left my dream job 3 years later and moved my family to San Juan Island, up in the Puget Sound in the beautiful Pacific Northwest. And I've been freelancing there for over 18 years now, still making games, designing games, but primarily moved into the movie side. So, for example, I designed Rio and Rio 2, that's coming out, and Monsters University is my recent one. So, let's see, I still draw on paper. I'm really low tech. I draw on paper. I know like 3 things on Photoshop. And I'm happy to say that just last year I put together my first website. I know, unheard of, right? Go freelance. Thank you, thank you. Go freelance, 18 years ago and not make a website or a blog or something, and I held out. But then I was forced to do it because of the other Peter Chans that surfaced, because it turns out my name is very common. It's like John Smith. And so thanks to the other Peter Chans, it forced me to put together this website so people don't get us mixed up more and more. And so if you're here to listen to the other Peter Chans, I'm sorry to disappoint you. Sorry. And I happen to teach concept design at this awesome animation college in Denmark. And the students there always ask me variations of the same questions, right? Questions like, what feeds your creativity, right? How do you produce art? How do you come up with original ideas and thoughts when you've got busy brain or you're running on empty, right? And one of the toughest questions I've been asked was, what's the one thing that keeps you from doing your best work? And I couldn't answer that right away. And I told them, look, let me think about it on my way home. And when I land, I'll answer that. So and I realized the answer to what's the one thing that holds me back from doing my best work are my fears. And so I started exploring these questions, and the word authentic kept surfacing, right? And so I decided to force myself to answer, what does it mean to me to have authentic creativity? And so by exploring, I decided I'll turn that into my topic for today. And so before I dive into that, let me just share with you, and this was Lee's idea, share with you what it's like to be in my studio for the week, okay? So I'm a pre-production guy. I come in super early. Usually the script's not finished. Maybe it's just an idea from the project leader or art director. And he usually gives me this big assignment, and like create the world. But make it believable, make it functional, and make it different. Make it original as much as you can. Yeah, hard assignment, right? So Mondays are usually reserved for research. I hit the library. Yes, the library. I collect my books. I surround myself with reference material. I start reading because reading gives me pictures in my head. that's not in front of me. And then I supplement by going through my morgue file that I've collected over the years, and I use the internet to supplement the rest of my research. And I surround myself with this. And then Tuesday and Wednesdays are the days of problem solving. I've got to accomplish my assignment, and then at the same time, I've got to listen to this part right here. I've got to listen to my gut, my intuition. Okay? And sometimes my intuition and the assignment are in line. And those are like the sweetest weeks to work. And then there are times where my intuition and my assignment clash. But I trust this part in me because it knows me best. So I will try to shove this, square peg into a round hole thing. And there's a little bit of compromise, but eventually I shove it in there. All right? Thursday comes around. I have to psych myself to draw because I can think forever, but they're not paying me to do that. They're paying me for this piece of paper. So I've got to make myself draw this out. Take this half-baked idea, right? Make it readable, and hopefully, with all my reference and everything, it makes sense. And then Friday morning, I've got to put the final touches on it. And if it's a bad idea, I highly recommend just making the presentation look sweet. But if you can, and then I send it off. An hour before the conference call, I send it off. And then my drawings get blown up in a dark room somewhere in some studio. And usually in that room is the director, the producer, and 5 other incredibly talented designers. And I'm on an island, so I can't see their faces. I can't see their body language, right? So I don't know if my ideas are any good as I'm pitching it. So I have to just trust that my ideas are worthy. And basically, I'm just on my back, belly up, totally open. And it's scary, but I have to go for it. Okay, so that's like my week. So as I reflect on the creative process, I ask myself, what are the things that I value? And 3 things come to mind. All right, here they are. Number 1, I practice being vulnerable. Folks like Pema Chodron, Thich Nhat Hanh, Brene Brown, Seth Godin, even Steve Jobs, Neil Gaiman, and a great designer like Stefan Sagmeister. These guys say, in their own words, of course, innovation, creativity, personal transformation, connection, and great learning all begin with being vulnerable. Okay? Number 2, I practice what I call being good with discomfort. Because when I'm brave and I reach outside my comfort zone and I work through my fears, there's opportunity for growth. Okay? And number 3, I practice what I call making space in my head for creativity, making space. Because how can I connect with my intuition and listen to my passions if I'm always overwhelmed or overworked and exhausted, right, and running on fumes? So I'll talk more about that later. But here's the thing. I don't want you looking up here like I've got this all figured out. I am not an expert in anything. I'm like you. I wake up every morning. I do my best. And if I fall on my face, thank God, the sun rises the next day and I can try all over again. So let's start with number 1, practicing vulnerability. So we have this primal emotion, and it's called shame. Okay? And shame is all around us, and unfortunately it is a big part of our culture. And for some of us, it's also part of our upbringing. And shame is all about having fears. And our fears come from this place, this like smear of a brain that sits at the stem of our spine, and that's our lizard brain. And that's where our fight and flight mechanism comes from, right? And the lizard brain's job is to keep you fearful. It wants to keep you feeling safe and secure. right? And you know those fears of feeling not good enough, the fear of not smart enough, not clever enough, not fast enough, right? The fear of being wrong, the fear of failure, not fitting in. And my big hang-up that I finally let go last year was the fear of being found out as a fraud. The fear of being found out as a fraud. And I wish I had more time to talk about that. That'll be like another keynote like 12 years from now. But for me, being a product of my environment, I ended up being prone to shame. So some people, not all, some people who are shame-based, go down the perfectionist path, right? And we all know there's no such thing as being a perfectionist, right? But I didn't know. I was young. I was inexperienced. And when you're a perfectionist, you're like being a really awesome magician. And the one act that you're really good at is the sleight of hand, right? It's like, look over here, you guys. Look at my perfect drawing, right? Look at my perfect life. Look at my perfect job. Look at my perfect kids. Look at all my accolades, right? But don't look over here. Don't look at my other hand. Don't look at my fears. Don't look at my weaknesses. Don't look at my addictions. Don't look at my shame, right? And when you stuff your fears down there, you put up protective armor, right, in front of you. And that protective armor, let's see, that protective armor, that veneer, that ego facade, those masks that are in front of you, that's to keep people at a safe distance, right? Because that's the shield that you want people to look at and to believe, not this stuff down here that you're hiding, right? So the problem is that armor prevents any kind of connection, and that's what it's all about, isn't it? Connection. We do art so we can connect with the audience on the other side, with the people we want to connect with, right? I mean, that's what we desire as humans, right, is connection. That's why Facebook is so popular. So to be vulnerable is to soften. And you're visual people. Just imagine being softer, being kind, being honest, being compassionate to yourself first. Right? Because the more vulnerable you are, the more courageous and brave you will become. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but it's true. You got to trust me. So to be true to yourself, my suggestion is to be more vulnerable by shedding those protective armors, one layer at a time. Or at least pound them down so then it's like paper thin. Okay? So can you imagine not having to worry about those protective layers? Can you imagine that? How liberating and free that would feel, how light you would feel. You don't have to switch them out when you go to a family reunion or when you have to present your artwork in front of all your peers, or when you're on Facebook and Twitter. You don't have to switch out your masks, right? You can actually be you. You can actually be authentic. That'd be pretty sweet. So by shedding means reaching in, reaching into that dark corner, pulling out that fear and exposing it. And let the sun shine on it. And while it's out, you want to label it. You want to name it. And say it out loud. Right? You don't have to say it in your head. That's not good enough. Even if you're alone in your room, you got to say it out loud. Because by saying it out loud, you're taking the power out of it. Right? And guess who hates that? The lizard brain hates that. Because the lizard brain wants to keep you secure. Right? So the lizard brain hates it when you say it out loud, because it's no longer hiding anymore. It's no longer controlling you anymore. So a long time ago, when my kids were really little, and don't forget, I was a perfectionist, and I was setting really high expectations, And my kids were just being kids. They would do something, and it would trigger something inside me, and I would get angry, get mad. And years would go by. And then one day, my kids, being kids, did something, and it triggered something deep inside me, and I saw red. Right? And fire came out of my mouth, and I heard my dad's voice for the first time, and I freaked out. And I knew right then and there I had to go and do something about it. And because, hey, I want to be a responsible parent. I don't want to pass my crap down to my kids. It's got to stop with me. Right? So you're probably thinking, what does that have to do with creating art? Well, for me, parenting and creating art aren't that different. You have an idea, you bring it to life, you help it develop, not knowing how it's going to end. Right? So the point I'm trying to make is, if I kept my protective armor up and I stuffed my anger issues down, would that be fair to my kids? No way. So let me ask you, if you kept your protective armor up and you stuffed your fears down, would that be fair to your creative self? So you see, you, the authentic you, deserve to be truly seen. You are worthy of it. You guys good? So let's go with practice number 2. Practicing being good with discomfort. So it's entirely natural for us to be fearful with the unknowns. But that's because the lizard brain is part of who we are. Right? So it wants us to play things safe. Because safe equals no pain. And I'm not talking like life-threatening pain. I'm talking about the pain or the feeling that you get when you are outside your comfort zone. Right? So when you're not feeling any pain, that means you're not doing anything new. You're not learning anything. So the advantage to moving past our fears and taking more risks is seeing it out as an opportunity for growth. So being good with discomfort means to stretch your comfort zone to a new, more creative normal. The goal is to eventually, with practice, become more comfortable with change. It's not so scary anymore. Sure, there's always a chance for failure when you take risks, but there's also a really good chance of succeeding too. You have to just go for it. Like Neil Gaiman says, to make glorious mistakes. And that's because making mistakes means you're doing something. It's all good. So I have many examples of, being good with discomfort, but I think the best example is just me standing here in front of you right now, because for one, I'm vulnerable, I'm sharing some personal stuff with you, but also my friends know that I'm an introvert, so for me to be up here is kind of a big deal. It's really difficult for me. But I know deep down that what's important is this connection that I'm making with you right now, and also that I know at the end of the day I'm going to learn something about myself. Something good will happen. But being good with discomfort all the time is not sustainable. Every once in a while, you're going to have to stop, take a break, have some solitude to reflect. Right? And give yourself a quiet break and let your inner critic focus on the present moment. Have some nurturing time for yourself. Ask yourself how you're feeling. Slow down. Have a cup of tea, sit by the window, and ask how you're feeling. And if you did really well that week, go out and get yourself a scoop of ice cream because you deserve it. And if you're wounded because you had a really rough critique or you had a rough week, still, go out and get yourself a scoop of ice cream. You still deserve it. Right? And then you can recharge your batteries get back on the horse and get ready for the next round. Because if you're serious about your art, you will always be seeking out that discomfort. Which segues nicely to number 3. Practicing making space in our heads. We live in a world that is, I mean, you guys know, we live in a world that is overwhelming, overstimulating, full of distractions, full of worry and stress, full of clutter, visual clutter, material clutter, mental clutter, right? So how in the world can we come up with original thought and even listen to our intuition, right? Sometimes our brains are like an episode of Hoarders, right? It's just so full, and we're really lucky if there's like a clear path that runs through our mental house. So, to make space, let's look at our mental house. Imagine there's a spare bedroom in the back of your head, and you clean it out. Nothing on the walls, nothing on the floor. It's all white. Sounds good, right? You open a few windows, let the breeze go through. And then there's an air shaft that runs from that bedroom down to your heart or your gut. So now you've got these 2 rooms, there's a clear path between, and for clear communication. All right? Guess who's going to find out about this plan? Your lizard brain. And he's going to throw in distractions. And he's going to sabotage this idea. And I know you know what I'm talking about, because how many times have you decided to do something, and then at the last second you pull out and you stop? That's lizard brain. Making you safe, keeping you fearful, doesn't want you to have any experiences or learn anything new. Right? That's like artists who draw the same style all the time, or people who always just draw the same subject matter all the time. Right? It's cozy in there. It's familiar. They get a lot of kudos. But what happens if someone knocks on his door and says, hey, I want you to design this game for me, but it's this style and it's maybe this kind of subject matter? Pretty scary? Is it worth taking? So here's my suggestion in making space. It's what Leo Babauta calls media fasting, and some others call it taking a digital Sabbath. So this is called media fasting. Media are all the things that you love, right? Watching movies, surfing, social networking, playing video games, right? And then fasting are those diets, those detox diets that cleanses your body of toxins, right? Some of you have probably tried it with some success. So what I'm proposing is cutting back on your media intake. Cutting back on your media intake for short periods of time to set healthy limits and do things in moderation. Right? I didn't say cut it out completely. I love technology. But you're adults. I want you to figure out how to set those limits. How long you should be doing this. Set some boundaries around them. Because as you know, when you overindulge in something, there's usually a consequence that follows. So moderation is good. Notice that I did not mention reading books. Neil Gaiman says reading books, especially fiction, is a great way to exercise your imagination muscle. That's why you always hear people say, oh, I prefer the book over the movie. And it's because your imagination is a powerful thing. Can you imagine tapping into that? I know this works because I practice this most of my life, and I also challenge my students. And the serious students always come back to me the following year and tell me basically the same feedback. I always get, I feel like my days are longer, I feel rested, and I feel more creative. And these guys are like 20-year-olds, right? And if they've already figured out how to set healthy boundaries around their media intake, then they're off to a really good start. So let's say you guys are brilliant. You guys decided, I'm going to give this a try. Your mental house, you've got that clean bedroom in the back of your head, and you've kept it pretty clean for a long time. Now it's time to fill it. And you want to fill it with cool experiences. Because what's nice about experiences, they don't take up any room. And I believe if you want to be original and different, you'll need to add something to the mix. You're going to have to add something to your art. And that's where your personal experiences come from. Because the way each of us sees the world is very distinctive. By doing this, you've just automatically made your art yours. You've automatically made your art unique because only you have had that experience. We haven't. Sorry about that. That was for dramatic. Sorry. But only you have had that experience, you see? Because I know that this is true because when you are tired, and I'm guilty of it too, because I'm human, when we're tired, we go into automatic mode. We grab a couple things off Google search, we do a mashup, and we call it good. Right? No pain. We're just rehashing ideas. Right? So, I mean, who do you think, why do we think so many movies and games always look alike? Right? Who's in charge? Is the lizard brain in charge, or are you in charge? And I believe that that's where our personal experiences come in, to kind of like set us apart. So having experiences can be traveling the world, and I know that's expensive sometimes, but it could also mean just walking around the block to have an experience. Look, we have the Golden Gate Bridge here, right? People travel all over the world to come here and walk across the bridge. And we live here, or you live here, and you see the bridge, but you've never walked across it. And it's free. Or you go grocery shopping, you go to Safeway, and rather than taking a right turn to Safeway, you take a left turn. You'll still get the Safeway. You just happen to see something else along the way. And that experience, you might see something that you can take and put it into your artwork. You see what I'm saying? Just shake things up a little bit. And having experiences also means picking up new skills. Take a cooking class, right? Take a sewing class. Figure out how to do your own electrical, your own plumbing. And if you mess it up horribly, that's when you can call the professional. But at least you gave it a try, right? And in that process, you've learned something. Because fresh ideas come from that. You just need to start doing. A while back, I went to visit my friend Tim Schafer. I don't know if you've heard of him. He makes games. And I visited Tim, and he took me out to dinner. And we had a really nice dinner, and after that, I thought we were just going to go home. And instead, he took me to a bar, and he bought me a drink, and I said, Tim, you don't have to do this. You don't have to entertain me. We can just go home, watch Letterman, and go to bed. And he goes, no, Peter. He goes, when I come to your island, you give me an island experience. And when you're in the city, I'm going to give you a city experience. And he's right. After the bar, and I totally enjoyed myself. We had another long visit, and I soaked it all in. And then he took me to another place that played live music, and it was already midnight. And next thing you know, I'm head-banging with the rest of them, and then eventually I found myself passed out on a sofa. But I'm so grateful for that, because he pushed me. He gave me this opportunity to do something that normally I wouldn't do. But now, if I ever had to design something that needed that vibe, I can now go back in and pull that experience out, right? The essence of that experience out and use it. So it's time to share some work with you. And I'm going to be vulnerable again because some of these drawings aren't all that impressive, but it kind of gives, it's a good example of what we're talking about. So this first one is when I was helping Double Fine with this game, Broken Age. And this is what I consider a freebie. I call it a freebie, or you can call it a treat. Seth Godin calls it a gift, where you have an idea and you give it away without reciprocity. It's one way. The reason why I do this drawing is for the sake of connection, right? Because really, it's not really part of in the environment. It's not really part of the game. It was just an idea that I had, and obviously this idea is really wacky and strange, right? It was when I took a knitting class with my kids, to knit scarves for Christmas. And I remember looking around the room and seeing the people knitting stars and reindeers, and it was mesmerizing. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool that maybe you can knit an environment? So I just socked that idea away, hoping that one day I can pull it out and use it. And so I thought, I'm just going to go for it. Even though it's so lame and so weird and unusual, I'm still going to just draw it up and give it to them. Okay? So it's a freebie for the sake of connection. And this next one is from Monsters University. And so if you can imagine how scary that is, this is, again, a great opportunity. Pixar gives me a call and says, we're going to give you a shot. And I want you to figure out what the university is going to look like. And so I came in super early, right? We didn't have a script or anything. The characters weren't even designed yet. So my job was to figure it out. And fortunately, the year before, I visited Princeton. The only experience I got from walking through an Ivy League college, because obviously I did not go to an Ivy League college. And so I remember walking around and looking at the ivy growing on the buildings, not knowing that Monsters University was coming up, right? So I do this thing, because I don't take a lot of photographs. I do what's called mental noting. It's a form of meditation where you can memorize things, okay? And so I remember seeing the ivy growing on the walls, and I remember the silhouettes, the beautiful silhouettes and shapes that came from that. And then that's when I realized I'm going to use that ivy as a second level motif, right? Because there's the architectural monsters motif, and then I thought I'll use the ivy as the second layer to hopefully enhance the monster look. And this drawing means a lot to me because, as you can see, it says 001. So there was a lot of anxiety on this drawing because this is going to be the first drawing that I'm going to pitch to them and try to sell them my look and my ideas. Okay? The next one is, again, your job is to design, or my job was to design the dorm room. Now, if I just did a plain dorm room, that would be boring. Usually boring and playing things safe never leads to connection. So I always add a little extra something to my drawings for the sake of connection. So I put in the characters so you can relate to them a little bit. Now, again, I don't know anything about the story, not that much. The only thing they told me was that Sully, at the time, was studying to be a dentist, and Mike was, he's only in college to party, but his skill was he knew a lot about scaring. And that's all they gave me. So, again, it's going into your memory banks and your experiences of visiting, like for me, visiting my friends in dorm rooms and seeing how they decorated. You know, I've got my Bruce Lee poster on the top. I've got my beanbag and Rubik's Cubes. I got my vinyls out, because those things are nostalgic. Those things mean something to me. And it did connect, because I get the feedback was, this made us laugh. You know, because Mike, why would he have a turban? He has no hair. And why is he wearing a towel around his waist when he has no privates? Right? And so then I knew that these things, my drawings were connecting with Pixar. Okay? So I'm just reaching out to the art department right now. You see the free hat you get at Chevy's? See, it's at the top. The next one is, so this one here, this one is called a freebie as well. This was a freebie to Pixar. Obviously, the background, there's not really much about the architecture, right? It was just an idea that I had. I wanted to give them this treat, this gift, and the idea of history at this college. I thought it would be really cool to have the students rub the feet of the sculpture or the statue for good luck, and before games, big games, right? Because you rub it before exams. And I got that idea from, I don't know if you guys been to Seattle, but there's Pike Place Market. And out in front of Pike's Place Market, there's where they throw the fish market there. There's a bronze pig out in front. And everyone rubs the nose on that bronze pig. That's where I got that idea, from that experience. And what's cool about this, for me, is that here I am, I've got this idea, I doodle it up, I throw it one way to Pixar, not expecting anything back, and all I'm trying to do is reach to the art department. And then I find out later, I get a call from the production designer, and he goes, guess what? Pete Docter, who happens to be, he was the director on this at the time, he directed the first Monsters, and he said, I like these so much, have it all blown up, have all Peter's drawings blown up, and put down the hall between the art department and the story department. So then when the story guys go through, it'll get them inspired. So here I was, with this simple doodle, I'm now reaching the art department, and now I'm reaching, connecting with the story department. And then I find out that it ends up in the movie. So now I'm reaching beyond that, from just having this idea and listening to my intuition and going for it. So that's that one. Do we have time? Yeah, wow, we're on a good schedule here. So do you guys want to see a little more? Yeah. Okay. Now, this is a little different, but I still have you guys in mind. All right? Now, you guys thought I was going to show you more of my artwork, right? But I know that if I shared my artwork, that wouldn't really get you motivated to go out and do stuff. I wanted to show you real people doing stuff, having real experiences. And because I know that if you went out and had these experiences, you can draw from them too, right? Literally. Now that slideshow was put together from the help of good friends and family. Some of it was mine too. But what I found out when I was putting it together, that these people in my life inspire me, right? And they remind me to get off my butt and do something. And I realized when I was putting it together that I wasn't really doing it for you. I was doing it for me too. I need to be reminded to do that. So in conclusion, Brené Brown says, allowing ourselves to be truly seen is a powerful source of innovation, creativity, personal transformation, and connection. It starts with being more vulnerable. And while the rest of the world is busy hiding out in their cozy comfort zone, I believe the best art are done by people who listen to their intuition, who have an idea, give it a try, not knowing how it's going to end. So choose courage over comfort. And lastly, there's value in doing things in moderation, right? Cutting back on things that don't matter. Simplify. Making space so you can rediscover and reconnect with your authentic self first, and then your authentic creativity will follow. So, as we know, the games industry is evolving, right? It's ever-changing. So I ask you, do something different. When you have an opportunity to make a game or design a game, make it unique. Don't fall into the land of compliance and mediocrity. Listen to your intuition. Trust your gut, okay? Trust this part, and don't let this part talk you out of it. Okay? So, thank you guys. Thank you very much. Thank you. No, thanks. We have time. Yeah. I'll be open to take some questions. And if I don't know the answer to them, forgive me, and I'll write it down, and I'll get back to you. I just don't want to BS anybody. I want to be thoughtful. Yeah.
Hi. When you get the idea for something like a Monsters, Inc. version of the thinker, do you then go and reference the actual thinker, or is that just as you remember the thinker?
Well, that's a great question. I do get reference, but when I tap into my personal experiences, it's usually just the essence of it. Right? And so if that's like the thinker is more like a memory of what the thinker is, because obviously it's a monster's version of it, so it doesn't have to look like the real thinker. Like I shouldn't have used the thinker, because it should have been more like a founding father of the college, right? If I had more time to do think about it. It's hard because, you guys, if you think about, like right now I'm working for Paramount Pictures. I'm working for this really awesome production designer. He designs for most of Tim Burton's films, like Frankenweenie, Nightmare, right? And so he has me pitching twice a week, Tuesdays and Fridays. So if you can imagine, I have to move along fairly quickly. So I don't always have time to get reference. I just have to go with my gut and just go for it. And sometimes, you can see some of those drawings are okay. It's the idea. And that's the thing. If you guys have good people skills and you're a problem solver, you'll be all right. Anyone else? Don't be shy.
Hello. I do have one question about we apply what you say to art, and then do you feel like you can apply it to anything else?
That's right. That's why I said art. It's whatever you want it to be.
So
I mean, it could also move into your life if you wanted to.
So that's actually leading to another question. So if someone else, he or she was asking a question about this type of creativity, but what you realize actually she or he doesn't do anything what we mean about go out and to have experience, will you just encourage them to do that?
Yes.
Okay, that's my question.
Okay. Yeah, here's the thing. It's balance. Basically, I'm just telling you to have a life too, okay? I mean, I believe you guys all work really, really hard. But at the same time, you need to take care of yourself too. You need to have balance. And I know you work like 10 hours at work, and then you go home and you play some more, or you work some more. But we only have this one life. It's not a trial run, so you might as well fill it, right, with experiences. So all I'm saying is just have balance. Yes?
This is from a personal thing. A while ago, we were in a class, and we were supposed to come up with our idea of a game, and I came up with this what I thought was a creative idea, and the class liked it and everything, but at the end I couldn't sell it, and then they went with this typical pirate idea, and they told it like, your idea is so weird, we cannot connect with it, we don't know if people like it, and I couldn't sell. And I to this day I still think that it would have been an original thing, but they decided to go with something safe. And how do you win people with your ideas?
That's a great question. Well, they don't know what they're doing. Because they're listening to the lizard brain, and they're just, they think by keeping it safe, they're not going to make any money, right? So let go of them. Don't listen to them. I still say, keep that in your back pocket. Keep that great idea, because it's important. You're passionate about it. And one day you'll find the right people that will listen to you. That's why when you see these games that are so innovative, there's a reason why it's so innovative. They're taking a chance, not knowing how it's going to end, right? So try to find companies that support that they're open to that if you can. I know I have. And I find myself, I don't work for those kind of people then. And I mean, I'm fortunate enough now that I can, find who I want to work for. But I know when you first start out, yeah, sometimes you have to compromise. But that's where I was telling you about, you listen to this part, and then you have your assignment. And sometimes you have to compromise a little bit, but I still shove my idea into it. And I still accomplish the assignment, and at the same time, I still feel a little bit good about what I did, because I got to sneak in my personal experience into it, or my idea into it. Yes?
Hi. It was very encouraging to hear all of the different techniques you used. One of them that you mentioned was mental noting, and I was wondering where you got that from, or did you develop that on your own? Or?
No. I'm not that smart. Sylvia Bierstein, I believe is her name. She is a Buddhist. And she taught me through her book. I went on a silent retreat. Once a year, I try to go on a silent retreat. Which means I go and camp by myself. I don't talk to anybody. I don't say anything. And it is an opportunity to go inside. And so what happens is, it's really cool. When you don't hear your voice, you get to slow down. You actually listen to your body. Like, you don't look at the clock. You leave all the technical stuff, all the gadgets at home. You listen to your body. You listen to When you're hungry, that's when you eat, right? And if you feel sleepy, go to sleep. So you'll get in tune. You kind of reset, okay? And when you do that, and when you go walking, for example, it's like mental noting means, for example, if I'm walking through and hiking, I pay attention to everything. I note in my head if I hear a bird, if I hear the waves, and then I'm also sensitive to what I'm feeling. I feel the wind on my cheek, I feel the warmth of the sun, I feel the coolness of the shade, and then I also listen to the crunch of my feet, the leaves, the gravel, the feeling I get from the bottom of my soul, you know, sharp stones, or I'm walking on grass. I just call it out in my head. Now, what's cool about being in the moment when you do that, 15 minutes goes by and you haven't thought of one thing. You just meditated while walking, right? And by doing that, by being in the moment, you actually memorize your environment. So when I'm in a situation, like my wife and my kids know that if I'm walking around and all of a sudden Dad's gone, and it's because I'm standing and I'm looking at something and I'm just taking it all in. I'm memorizing it. And then it's socked away because I don't take pictures, you know. And so when that time comes, when I'm sitting at my desk, that's when I can pull out, you know, that Harry Potter thing where you take the wand and you see him take the memory out? That's what it's like that. You can just take out that one idea or that essence of that experience, and then you can use it. So mental noting is just a form of being in the present.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else? Yes.
Hey, I was just like, when you were talking about the struggling and how you wrestle your fears, and like the specific being afraid of the people will find out that you're a fraud. Like this is like something I can...
Oh, we do have time. Okay, so okay. Thank you for bringing that up. All right, so being found out as a fraud, that's a big one for me because I didn't have formal training, right? I kept it a secret until I got to college, and then I was forced to start drawing in public. And then I went to an art school that didn't have any film classes back in those days. It was back in the day of illustration, doing editorials, you know, that kind of stuff, spot illustrations. There were no film classes back when I was in school. So I was a traditional illustrator, right? And so I had this opportunity to do games. And at the same time, while I was at games, I was a fraud because I didn't play games. I wasn't really into games. But here I was making games, designing games. So I felt like a fraud there. And then when I finally had the opportunity to do film work, right? Like my first job was a storyboard episode 1. Design ants. I designed ants from the island. And I've never designed film before, so I was a fraud. And then storyboarding, right? I've never storyboarded. I never took a class on storyboarding. And then episode 1 comes around and says, hey, you want to storyboard some shots? It was like I had to fake it. I was always pretending. I was always faking it. So for the longest time, people would come up to me and say, you know, hey, I really like your work. You know, you did a great job. I wasn't able to really receive it back then. I wasn't able to like take it in and look them in the eye and say thank you. It was always like, because I felt like a fraud, I would always like look away and say, oh, it's all right, you know. And so finally, I worked on this one film last year for Blue Sky Studios, and they're making it right now. They totally gave me freedom to figure out this entire world. And it was the hardest project because I was problem solving throughout the whole thing. How this part connected to this part, connected to this part. And I thought of every little bit of it. And they're making it now. And after that experience, I thought, what am I afraid of? They hired me to figure this out. Even though I didn't have proper training, it's like I helped them do this. And that was when I finally dawned on me. I remember I was on a walk. And then I was like, I'm going to let that go. You know, that's what I was saying, you know, pull out that fear and label it. And it's like I finally did that. And I let that one go. So now I don't, you know, now I don't think about it anymore. It's like if people come up to me and say, hey, would you like to give this a try? Now I'm cool with it. You know, thank you.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. Yes.
Hi. I know with a lot of creative work, there's a certain like nebulousness when you're like in the thick of it, and you're in this like state of uncertainty where you have no idea whether it's good or not. And I know at my stage, like I have yet to receive like validation for a lot of the work I'm doing. And I feel like you have received that validation over and over again. And I'm wondering if that has changed the way you do your creative work, or if you use, or if you still have that uncertainty throughout the process and you use that to your advantage.
That's a great question. And if my wife was here, she would say that even at this stage where I'm at, I eat a lot of ice cream because I'm wounded. Because some days I walk home from my studio is across from the house. My lawn is my commute, and there are days where I just drag my feet home because I feel like I didn't come up with a good idea, and she feels it. You know, the whole family feels it, and then I find out later that, oh, they like the idea, and then it's like I'm better again. But hey, I go through the motions, you know, and yes, to answer your question, yes, I do have moments almost every week where I feel like this is not a good idea. But I have to listen to my gut. Because if I don't listen to my gut, then I'm just rehashing ideas, and it's just going to be like everyone else's. So I have to try. It's rewiring. You have to rewire yourself and just go for it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
We only have a couple minutes left, but I have to ask. A whole generation loves your work in film, but a lot of us fell in love with you through the games that you made. So can you talk a little bit about the stuff that you're doing currently for Double Fine? I won't tell Tim.
Yeah, don't tell Tim. No, I can't really talk about what I'm doing for Tim. And I'm done doing stuff for Tim. No, I meant, I meant he doesn't have any more work for me to do. He's got all these wonderful projects going on. And I have to say, I mean, I'm not supposed to hype any companies or anything, but, you know, if it wasn't Double Fine, if it wasn't Tim, if I found a company that is innovative, or these guys actually listen to their gut and go for it, that's the company I'm looking for. You know, they're the people that will receive my silly, goofy ideas of knitting robots or whatever, right? So that's who I seek out. And those are the people I want to surround myself with, right? It's like picking your friends. You want to surround yourself with supportive people in your lives, right? Yes?
Yes. When you were talking about mental noting, and you said, you know, your family kind of knows when daddy's away.
Yes.
How did you kind of transition your family into that? And like, when you have smaller children, you know, they don't really understand.
No,
and,
I got them going on it when they were really little. They're adults now. My
Right.
kids are 21 and 18. I got my son Zach. He's doing silent retreats now. So my daughter's different. You get one of each. So, but when they were little, I did get them. You know how you get them going is I have them, like we go to the beach because I live on an island. You go to a beach and I have them close their eyes and I have them just listen to the ocean or listen to their surroundings. And then I have them, and I ask them, what do you hear? You know, it's a game to them. They don't know what they're doing, but, you know, it's a game to them. And that's how you can bring them into it. And another way to get them, having little kids, it's so important to, like, build up their curiosity, right, their imagination. So I used to get them into, like, classical music, for example. I would play certain soundtrack songs. And I would have them listen to it, you know, not a long one, like a 2-minute song. And then I have them close their eyes and they listen to that one particular soundtrack song. And then I ask them, what did you see? Because when you listen, you actually you see animated things happening, or you see, you know, you have feelings. And that's exercising their imagination. And for any of you guys, and that's a really good thing, and I teach this in my class, I play, you know, various songs, and I have them listen to it. And each of the students, hearing one song, everyone has different stories to tell. And so if you're ever blocked, creatively blocked, I highly recommend not listening to your rock and roll or anything like that, just to find a song and listen to it and, you know, imagine what that short film is happening in your head. And that will help you get out of that creative block. So I highly recommend, you know, giving that a try, especially with young kids. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Hi, I'm a game designer by trade, and I find that my best work comes from collaborating with others.
Yes.
You talk a lot about trusting your gut. How do we balance trusting other people's gut as well?
That's a good one. Well, yeah, you have to trust them, that's for sure. It's hard because that's a great question. That's a good question. Again, it's been a long time. Like if I'm working with a company that I'm familiar with, of course I trust the people in my life and the production designers or the project leads. I trust them. They know what they want. My job as a designer, though, is to make them happy. I'm not making the game. It's not my money, right? It's them. It's for them. So, but to be true to myself, that's where the experience part comes in, right? That's where I add my piece of the puzzle into the mix, right? And that's where the compromise comes in. Because it's for them, ultimately. I got to make them happy. If you want to do something all by yourself and independent, then you got to go for it. You got to use your own money. But if you're going to work with somebody else, then, you know, hopefully they'll respect you too, and that they'll listen to your ideas, right? So again, it's compromise and seeking out the right people, the right companies you want to work for that support your creative drive. Anyone else? No? Well, you guys are my gaming community, so I support you guys. Good luck with, good luck with everything. Do good work. Be well. See you guys. Thank you.